informative report together. The Falkirk Local Development Plan is one of our most important corporate documents, steering the location of development, infrastructure and investment in the area and providing the framework for plan and decision making. Our current LDP2 remains robust for the time being and delivery of its many proposals is ongoing. Given the lead times for producing these documents, we need to work towards its replacement, the LDP3. I am therefore pleased to bring forward this report on the Annual Development Plan Scheme, which describes the early work that has been done over the last year to kickstart the LDP3 process and updates the future programme for preparing and adopting the new plan. Preparing the LDP3 will be a complex task, balancing many competing interests, and the process is a lengthy one. Planning authorities are grappling with new legislation, new duties and a new set of national priorities that's set out in the National Planning Framework 4. However, a significant amount of early consultation has been carried out already and the pulling together of the evidence required to underpin the plan is well advanced. I look forward to the formal evidence report, which is the first major milestone in the process, coming to full council in due course. I particularly welcome the commitments made to consult on each stage of the new plan, which are set out in detail within the development plan scheme. If I can highlight just a couple of them extremely important aspects of the consultation, due to how much this is about Falkirk's future. Tell us about your place, an online public survey based on the place standard, with 2 simplified versions tailored for children and young people, and a presence at 2 major youth and children's events and calendar parts in the Helix, both equally important for getting the views of our young residents. After all, it's their future we're planning here. Fulfilling these commitments will be essential to producing a document which takes account of the views of its many stakeholders, in particular the communities we serve. And finally, I welcome the reference in the report to the Regional Spatial Strategy, which we are required to prepare under the new planning legislation. This strategy offers the potential to address some key spatial planning challenges at a regional scale and support the collaborative partnership with our Forth Valley neighbours, Clackmannanshire and Stirling councils on this important task. I would like to again thank officers for progressing our local development plan and providing this update report here today. I support the recommendations outlined as section 2 of this report. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Garner. Councillor Boyce.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. I'm happy to second Councillor Garner on that. With the experience of going through LDP2, and you see the importance that the local development plan has to all corners of our society, and as Councillor Garner has covered, it also affects all ages in our society, but it also affects business, both large and small, and every national body as well. I welcome the engagement, workshops and publicity, and I look forward to the call for ideas section, because that was quite well used the last time, and there was a lot of stuff brought in by a number of members from all parties, where we get to actually look at what we're going to be doing in the future. I think we introduced things that developers should consider, for example, their IT when they're coming through, rather than ripping the road up and putting new cable TV through after a development's finished. There was things like that came up, and it came up through members' experience, and I look forward to everybody's input into that, as well as the input from the people of Falkirk. That happily second.
Thank you, Councillor Boyce. I will now open it up for any questions or comments. Councillor Spears, have you anything on this matter? Because you've still got your hand up.
Yeah, I put my hand up for this matter. I don't know what Councillor Boyce meant by an off-the-wall party, but can we have expanded on the update, if it's forthcoming, the open space plan?
I'm not sure that that's entirely related, although there is part of a...
Yeah, there's a section on open space. I'd like to defer to Alistair, if you don't mind.
Mr. Shaw.
Thanks, Convener. So the open space strategy is another task on our task list to do, and we've started work on that. We've just completed an open space audit, so that's of all some 650 open spaces across the council area, assessing their quality, accessibility, etc. We're doing some analysis on that at the moment, and that will actually input to the LDP evidence report that's referred to in the report. and that's the first stage of progressing the strategy.
Okay, thank you. I'm always pleased to see the present open space plan includes the Kelpies and Grangemouth open space. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Steinberg.
Yeah, thanks, Convener, and thanks to officers for this report. I'm especially glad to see the feedback we've received from young people in the early engagement process, especially at the Know Your Eco event last year. I was very pleased to see the quality of young people's contributions and their interest in the long-term use of their home. I do have a couple of questions. On page 19, it suggests that under NPF4, standardised national policies will be replacing local policies, and on page 20 for LDB3, there will be no statutory basis for supplementary guidance. Just to ask officers, does this indicate that the local development plans will have less weight in planning decisions going forward?
Echo.
No, LDP2, and then the third one in development will be the key document for how we develop, how developers work with us and how businesses work with us in our homes for the future. So this is our key document and master document that we view from a council perspective.
Thank you. Just going on to the regional spatial strategies, and what specific areas of the planning process will having this strategy help us?
Council have been working, as I say, closely with Stirling and Clackmannanshire. We had the Connectivity Commission piece of work, which looked at connectivity. So, cross-border connectivity, our citizens don't consider when they're travelling around the borders that exist within across the Falkirk area. So how do we encourage more active travel across the boundary is one area. Another area that we're working very closely with us on forth climate forests. So how do we look at sequestration? How do we make sure we work collectively on our net zero ambitions? So that's another example. So active travel, connectivity, climate change are a number of different themes that are important from a regional perspective that will form part of the spatial strategy work.
Thanks. And do we know if there's going to be any resource implications for pursuing an RSS?
We are still awaiting final details from Scottish Government on the regional spatial strategy. At this point in time, we don't believe there are any further resources available, and we will have to do our very best to make sure we can resource this accordingly. There will be challenges, no question about that, but we believe we've been working very effectively with our colleagues across the authorities, and will continue to do so and deliver a spatial strategy.
Thank you. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you. And Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you very much for this report. It's very informative, despite the fact that I'm not as well up on planning matters as I should be, but I'll work on it. Can I ask, on page 14, there's reference to local place plans. Now, and reference to a small number of organisations who have expressed an interest in preparing a local place plan. Clearly, our aspiration would be that all communities engage with this and begin to look at local place plans. Can I ask what you mean by a small number of organisations and how widespread that is? And is there more work that we could be doing to try and engage more communities in developing local place plans?
Yes, thank you. Local place plans have an important ingredient in supporting the wider LDP. Local place plans are developed by the communities for the communities, so it's very much driven by them. We are there very much to support and encourage them, working with our communities teams and our planning colleagues to make sure that those local place plans are developed. The number described, we have had an expression of interest initially from 6 groups. This is now subsequently, we have conversations now with four of these groups. So it's not extensive. We're very keen to encourage more of our community to be involved in developing local place plans and encourage them to do so and come forward. But at this point in time, there are 4 we are working with very closely.
Thank you for that. And is there anything that local members could do to support this?
I think it's very much about encouraging your communities to engage and to discuss with us and our communities teams about their aspirations for their local place. So we're very keen to engage across the board and for members to promote the place plan initiative, and happy to provide any member with some further information to help them promote that wider.
I will come back to you on that. Thank you, and thank you, Convener.
Thank you. Councillor Bundy.
Thank you, convener. It's just a quick question regarding 7.1 on page 15. It says the requirement for an additional gate check examination is part of the LDP 3 process. In addition to the existing proposed plan examination will need to be budgeted for, but there's no figures or anything. Do we have any idea what these figures will be?
Thank you. As it highlights, we believe that appropriate provision has been made, but I'll maybe turn to Alistair if he has any further detail regarding that.
Thanks. We don't have a clue what the gate check examination is going to cost us. We know that the main proposed plan examination is typically tens of thousands. I think the LDP2 was something of the order of 50,000. We think the gate check won't take as long. It's not quite as involved a process, so hopefully it'll be considerably less than that. But it's a new process, so really we don't have, and it all depends on ultimately what level of disagreement or agreement there is over the evidence. Very, very difficult to say.
Okay, thank you. Okay, if there are no other questions, are we happy to agree the report?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the provisional financial outturn report, and I think it's Mr. Kearney that's going to take this report for us.
Yep, thanks, convener. This report presents the latest revenue projection for the General Fund and the HRA, with the last update provided to members in November. This projection is based on the actual financial performance for 9 months of the year, with estimates for the remaining 3 months. The key messages are summarised at section 5.1. Since November, the overall projected service costs have decreased by circa £1 million, with projected expenditure reducing across services with a few ups and downs, particularly within children and families, with projected costs falling by almost 600,000 as a result of lower employee costs and carers grant in excess of the costs incurred. The overall reduction in net expenditure has been offset by reducing the application of service concessions by a corresponding amount. As noted in previous reports, the budget was balanced by using 15 million of service concessions, and to the extent the budget is underspent, this will reduce the application of service concessions in the current financial year. So while the General Fund is operating within the approved budget, the budget is supported by almost 50 million of non-recurring reserves to achieve the balanced position. The other paragraphs within section 5.1 provide some more details of the main budget variances within each service. Other than the variances that I've highlighted, members should note the position with the local government pay award at section 5.114. The funding arrangements for the 23-24 local government pay award have still to be finalised, and details will be provided to members as part of the outturn report in June. It is still expected that the current budget provision plus additional Scottish Government funding will be sufficient to cover the expected costs. Section 5.2 provides a summary of the savings approved by members back in March. Overall, the percentage of savings expected to be achieved remains as previously reported at just over 60%. The main savings not achieved include reduction in teaching costs with an action plan put in place to reduce the overspend, the school transport savings that were not agreed, and savings relating to school pools. Given these savings are recurring, the impact on future years' budgets will have to be considered. Section 5.3 provides a summary of the General Fund reserves. Other than the unearmarked General Fund, which is projected to remain at 11.8 million, it's worth noting the projected service concessions balance has increased from 64 million to 65 million, reflecting the reduction in projected net expenditure. And members will also be asked for their views on any significant uncommitted funds from the 4.5 million that was specifically approved as part of the budget process. Section 5.4 summarises the HRA, which is broadly to be expected to be on budget, which will leave the reserves at 6.6 million, while property costs have risen higher than expected as a result of repair work, particularly for voids. This is expected to be offset by reduced employee costs and capital charges. The recommendations are noted at section 2, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr Kearney, for that. While the outturn is predicting a positive position with a slight improvement with underspends, it still clearly indicates the challenges that are before us, and some of the areas in which we still have high risks, and particularly around the pay awards, which we don't know where that will go. I think that there's obviously concerns that are around the unachieved savings, and that the implications for the coming budget going forward. And that will have to be addressed. I think the reduction in the service concessions, I think, is a positive, and it's something that again will need to be considered in the budget process about how we look to deploy service concessions as non-recurring reserves. It's not entirely free money. We need to be very careful about how those are deployed and make sure we make best use of those going forward. So while it's a positive year-end projection, it's still a challenging environment that's before us, and obviously there'll be difficult decisions as we go into the budget setting process in the next few weeks. So I'm happy to agree the recommendations, which is for noting in the report. I'll now open that up for any questions or comments. Councillor Murtagh.
Thank you, Convener, and I agree with many of your comments, especially in respect to the challenges that we face and the how we should apply service concessions, and the prudence that we need to be mindful of. Within the report itself, I just want to highlight a couple of things. Firstly, just that in section 7.7 on equalities, the text reads, equality and poverty impact assessments, EPIAs, were carried out as appropriate during the budget setting process, and no further EPIA is required in this report. And I agree to the extent that it would be rather pointless to do further EPIAs on this report. But I do want to make the point that equality and poverty impact assessments were not carried out as appropriate during the budget setting process, and that they were not provided to elected members as appropriate before groups met to make decisions or were able to put amendments. And that I think that point can't be forgotten going forward, and that even when they were provided with less than 36 hours to go, or even less than 24 hours to go in that process, they were not accurately done and they were not appropriate to the budget making process. I think it's really important that that isn't forgotten, as because that being restated in the report, so I wanted to mention that. The other point I want to mention, it was alluded to by Danny in his summation there, and it's referred to in the report, was that although what was said is that the budget service concessions and reserves, cover reserve, were used to balance the budget, it was also referred to in terms of those decisions which were put forward which were not taken. So in our budget setting process, we had items such as the homeschool transport, school pools, which were not debated at budget time, and there was no decision made on them, and there was no guarantee that those decisions would be made and that those savings could be made as part of the budget. So the budget was balanced as is required legally on the back of decisions which weren't debated and weren't made. And indeed, as we know over the course of this year, those savings were not realised because members did not agree to make them. So therefore, had it not been for, and no guarantee of these of these matters, and had it not been for savings made in other areas and budget underspends in other areas, then my understanding would be that actually that would have come out of service concessions, or if we could not have balanced it in with those other means. And as I say, as there's no guarantee of those other means, I think it's really important as we look back at this year that we're reflective on that in terms of going forward into our budget setting process, because I think it is, I personally did not agree with that approach last year, and I have real concerns that that precedent of asking members to balance a budget legally without appropriate EPIAs, without appropriate information to understand the entirety of the budget setting process, puts grave financial risk if we can't make significant in-year savings as we've been able to do this year. So although I don't have an amendment to the report, I think it's really important to be completely transparent about that and to be very reflective on that as we go into the budget process in the next few weeks. Thanks, Convener.
Okay, I'll ask Mr. Laurie just to make comment.
Thank you, Convener. In relation to EPIAs, note the point that Councillor Murtagh is making. We are very conscious of that in terms of finalising the approach to this year's budget. In the context of savings for consultation, which were in last year's budget, I mean, it is, Convener, a legitimate way of putting forward savings. One wouldn't wish to rely on it overly, but note Councillor Murtagh's comments in relation to it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Steinbank.
Yeah, thanks very much, Convener. At 5.1.19, it's suggested we have a council tax income shortfall of £200,000 in income. What proportion of this shortfall in council tax income is from lower than anticipated growth in new homes, and how much is from outstanding due payments?
Okay, Mrs. Temple will take that.
Thank you, Convener. We have not taken arrears as such as a factor into the projection. So the reduction in growth is twofold. It's partly about reduced new build, and it's also about greater council tax reduction. And that's, I think, a result of all the anti-poverty activity that's been happening across the council. Our collection rate is slightly down at the end of January compared to 2019-20, and that was our last kind of normal year, if you like, so pre-COVID. So our collection rate is very slightly down, but it's marginal, so we expect it to be around 96.3% compared to 96.4 in 1920, and that appears to be a sort of consistent pattern in other local authorities. So we are potentially seeing a little bit of a reduction, but I guess at this point, this 200,000 is a sort of projection, and it's mainly focused on the growth aspect.
Thank you very much. And I think just on the point of other local authorities, is the income variance and collection rate benchmarked? And if so, how do we rank?
I'm not sure if it's, I would have to go away and find out about that. I'm not sure if it's benchmarked throughout the year or if it's just a year-end process. Do you? Sorry, Karen, we have a benchmark.
Apologies, Councillor. I'll just come in on the benchmarking. It is done through the local government benchmarking framework. So we do have those stats, but they're produced on an annual basis. We'd need to go back to, I think it's the 2022. Would be the latest, 22, 23 data would be the latest rather than the most recent.
So the released year as well. Yeah, thanks very much. And just on the topic of council tax for the coming financial year, the Cabinet Secretary for Finance has asked that all councils spell out their intention to whether we're going to accept the council tax freeze by Friday. Have we responded, and how have we responded, if so?
I'll go to Mrs. Templeman on that.
We haven't responded at this point. My understanding is that there has been some debate between COSLA, and that the COSLA have obviously asked for an urgent meeting with the Deputy First Minister, and has highlighted that most councils will not be in a position to provide their intention because I think only 3 of the 32 are setting their council tax in advance of the deadline.
Okay, thank you, Convener.
I would also say that we are probably in that similar position, that we're not in a position to give an indication at this stage with regard to council tax. Councillor Bundy.
Thank you, Convener. It's regarding 5.3.13 on the spend to save. It's page 45. Here it says it helps cover the costs of voluntary severance reflected in the 5-year business plan. But I also thought that spend to save could be some investments which would mean like replacing older buildings. So, for example, in the when people have been talking about Bowness Recreation Centre and this, if we're closing that, what's the replacing of Bowness Recreation Centre facilities? The correspondence that I've had with some people is, well, you've made this saving, so now can you use some of that saving for new facilities? And I just had a general feeling that's what, not necessarily for Bowness Recreation Centre, but generally speaking, that's what spend to save would allow capital investment to then make savings elsewhere. Is that correct, or have I just been misunderstanding that?
Mrs Templeman, are you able to give an explanation around the spend to save?
Well, I think the spend to save reserve has to date been more around supporting that voluntary severance package. I think we have been discussing whether we try and have some more flexibility in that reserve so that it's not just ring fenced for that purpose. And I think that there'll maybe be some commentary on that in the budget report. I mean, I think in terms of the savings from the Bowness Rec Centre, that kind of goes back to the discussions at council in terms of the SPR and the enabling fund and that kind of area. So I think that that's quite separate to that reserve.
And I think that the spend to save reserve was earmarked as for voluntary service within the budget papers for last year.
Thank you for that clarity. That was a misunderstanding on my part. So thank you for helping me get that correct. But I think if we are making these tough choices, which are going to see buildings closed for cost-saving measures as well as other services, if we can make those investments to help ease that and save money, that would be a proactive approach.
And that is something that I think will be taken into the budget process for consideration. Councillor Spears? Councillor Spears, you're on mute. We can't hear you.
Sorry. To return to the subject of council tax, my group, Non-Aligned Independent Group, have written to the government minister asking salient questions regarding funding for local government. But as you have indicated that we have not responded to the Hamza Youssef statement at his party conference on the 5%, does that mean that we will be increasing by more than 5% as the rumours go in this council? The administration are considering 10%. Has there been a decision taken regarding the percentage that will be put forward at the forthcoming budget?
Councillor Spears, there's not been any discussions by council around a council tax level or indeed the freeze. And at this stage, the administration have made no decision with regard to what they would be doing at this stage, and there's been no figures put into it, certainly not discussed within the group. So I think we need to be very careful about spreading rumours at this stage, because there's been certainly nothing put forward by the administration as yet. We are still in our budget negotiations and deliberations.
Okay, we will wait with bated breath.
Councillor Nimmo.
Just a quick question, convener. Amanda, you mentioned voluntary severance. I'm just wondering, is there an adverse impact on the pension pot in relation to this at all?
No, the pension pot for individuals that would choose. No, not that.
Okay, as there are no further indications to speak, are we happy to note the report?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. We move into the motions before us, and the first one is on Grangemouth Refinery, and I'll go to Councillor Bundy.
Thank you, convener. I am extremely worried about the future of the Grangemouth Oil Refinery following recent announcements that it could close by as early as spring next year. And before I go into the details of my speech, I want to make one thing clear. I want the Grangemouth Oil Refinery to remain open. For me, Grangemouth isn't just a name on the map. It's the place where I call home. And when I was growing up, I watched friends find opportunities through apprenticeships at the refinery. Among my neighbours, I witnessed families relying on jobs at the refinery as their primary source of income. Throughout Grangemouth, I saw and still see local businesses thriving due to the foot traffic generated by the refinery. And in my tenure in politics, I have witnessed the intricate web of supply chains, businesses that rely on the refinery's operations. the abrupt closure of the Grangemouth oil refinery wouldn't merely be a blow to Scotland's economy or energy independence. It would be a devastating blow to families and businesses in Grangemouth and surrounding areas. We only need to look back a few decades in Scottish and British history to grasp the potential magnitude of the peril facing Grangemouth. In the 1970s and 80s, industrial towns across Britain were ravaged by mass unemployment following the closure of mines, leading to the depopulation and the dissolution of long-standing communities. And for many people in this room and people listening online, when they think about this period, the name that comes to their mind is Margaret Thatcher. And the people will rightly say it might be a bit hypocritical for a Conservative to talk about the risk of mass unemployment and depopulation through the collapse of industry. But my response to that is my brand of conservatism is very different. To me, conservatism means cherishing the place we call home and preserving what we hold dear. Grangemouth is my home, and I cherish the pivotal role Grangemouth plays in our nation's economy, its significance to Scotland's energy security, the cohesive community within Grangemouth, and the diverse array of local businesses it supports. As a Conservative born and bred in Grangemouth, my mission is to conserve all of this. Given the imminent threats posed by the potential closure of Grangemouth oil refinery, I implore the Executive to support two urgent calls of action. Firstly, I urge the Council to conduct an economic impact assessment if one is not already underway by the Scottish Government or Scottish Enterprise. This assessment would quantify the repercussions of closure without a viable replacement, shedding light on job losses, tax revenue declines, GDP impact, demographic shifts, and more. These figures would serve as the foundation for any future strategy for Grangemouth, with or without the refinery. Secondly, I propose regular detailed updates from the Grangemouth Future Industry Board, of which you, Convener, and Malcolm Benny are members of. This motion is not a critique of your performance, but rather a plea for enhanced transparency from the board. I would like to update members that there's been a word change in the motion being presented, and in point 4, rather than monthly updates, it's going to be changed to regular updates, reflecting that the Grangemouth Future Industry Board does not meet on a monthly basis. But given the urgency of the situation Grangemouth faces, it is imperative that the board's proceedings are more transparent and frequent. If you go online to the Grangemouth Future Industry Board page on the Scottish Government website, you can click on the 2 minutes from the meetings presented in 2023. These minutes contain no details. One is saying we've met to discuss the board's makeup, and the other one is we've met following the announcement from Petro Ineos, and we're going to talk more, and that's it in the minutes. And two meetings with no detail in the minutes. We need far more transparency and frequent meetings from that. And the standards that we should have for the Grangemouth Future Industry Board is actually the minutes from the January 2024 meeting. And it was in great detail, and that should be the norm. And these meetings should be happening, as I said, on a more regular basis, given the gravity of the circumstances facing Grangemouth. And there are many unanswered questions left in this discourse. What would closure of the Grangemouth oil refinery mean for the Acorn project? What would it mean for the Grangemouth flood protection scheme? These questions and more demand more exploration. A comprehensive economic assessment and regular detailed updates from the Grangemouth Future Industry Board are crucial steps in finding these answers. But these answers are only just the beginning. The complex interwoven nature of the devolution settlement regarding energy and net zero has allowed both our governments to avoid responsibility. But both our governments now have around a year to push differences aside and work together for the good of Grangemouth and Scotland. All options should be on the table to secure the future of Grangemouth oil refinery, including the possibility of state intervention. Let us all work together to protect Scotland's economy and energy independence. Let us all work together to protect families and businesses and the community of Grangemouth and surrounding areas.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bundy. Have a seconder?
Second with the right to come back in.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to just ask Mr McGuinness about some of the work that's been going on before I come in to speak on the motion.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Grangemouth Future Industry Board is represented by a number of public agency organisations, including Falkirk Council, as you rightly pointed out. It was set a number of tasks, a number of streams of works, which you'll see it within the minutes contained in the Scottish Government website. The refinery, there's no decision been made in terms of the refinery at this point in time. It's certainly there for consideration. We've been engaging with Scottish Government and Scottish Enterprise, who we believe are progressing an economic impact assessment as we speak. They are looking to secure information regarding hoteliers, how many people stay overnight in hotels. So they've been asking us that information. We've been providing some anecdotal information back to Scottish Government in that regard, and working very closely with Scottish Enterprise economists to as you say, highlight what the impact potentially could be should the refinery close. So that is progressing. We don't have a date for when that economic impact assessment will be completed, but we're certainly happy to keep members informed as that is progressing, and we're keen to also see that information come forward. That's all I really want to say at this point in time.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. I think that you have to be clear that we are dealing with commercial organisations, and they will take their decisions, which we will not be able to have too much by way of influence on in that respect. And they have gone significant ways to recognise that we need to address the climate action that's been called for, and that's one of the reasons that they are looking to change their business model. We as a council stand ready to support any transition to alternative fuels and support the reskilling of the workforce, working with others within that sector as well. And we know that the refinery is only one part of the business down that chemical sector, I can see from the minutes of just the most recent meeting, which was a bit more detailed, there were some very specifics asked of UK government in particular, with a lot of reticence, I have to say, from UK government to look at changing their views on things to be able to help that. In the meantime, ability to diversify while a longer term solution to alternative fuels was being looked to. So that has been a real challenge, and we currently await feedback from UK government on that, and whether that is something that can help any movement within Grangemouth. But we stand ready. We have funding within our growth deal of £10 million to assist that just transition. In the scheme of things, 10 million is not a lot of money to be able to do that, but that's why we have others like the Forth Valley College who sit on the GFIB as well, who also stand ready to look at developing local jobs for local people and making sure that happens. So there's a huge amount of work that is going on. I therefore have an amendment which I have shared with officers, and I apologise, I have had dreadful IT problems over the weekend and even last night, so I've not been able to circulate it. So I will read it out, and Jack will be able to give copies. It is deeply worrying about the future of the Grangemouth refinery following the recent news reports, believing it could have a great consequence for local jobs and have hugely detrimental impact on the local Scottish and British economy. We note that the economic impact assessment is being progressed by Scottish Government with support from Scottish Enterprise. Council will welcome this report, and members will be advised of its outcomes in due course. And as we've heard from Michael, we are actively participating in that process and providing information to that. The executive also acknowledges that Falkirk Council is a key partner in the GFIB alongside government, industry and business, and we commit to sharing any updates from their quarterly meetings relevant to the future of Grangemouth Refinery, and it's providing a briefing to all elected members. We have to be quite clear that this is not a board that is run by Falkirk Council, it is government, and therefore there will be elements that are not able to be shared within the public domain, and therefore not able to be shared with all members in that respect because of the commercial sensitivity. But we are active in doing that, and the programme for future meetings is anticipated to be more than quarterly. We don't have the timetable for those as yet, and the membership of the board will be increased as appropriate, and these were commitments that were made by the Minister. So while I fully understand where Councillor Bundy's coming from, I think we're not necessarily going to be able to stop the transition. It's like going to be coming. We don't have an end date for the refinery yet, but we do have an opportunity to plan for the future, and that's what we need to be doing locally to ensure that there are no job losses, that people are able to transition into alternative employments, and that our chemical sector within Grangemouth is able to thrive in a new greener environment going forward. Thank you. Councillor Gardner.
Yeah, you've covered everything, so I'm happy to second.
Okay, I will now open it up. Okay. Do we want a space to adjourn to consider?
Yes, convener, please.
Okay, that's fine. 15 minutes, is that adequate? And it gives people a comfort break?
Convener, I may have to leave the meeting as I've been summoned to a doctor's appointment, and I wondered whether I could make just a general contribution if I'm not able to come back into the meeting at this point, if that is appropriate.
Okay, okay, Councillor Murtagh.
I appreciate that indulgence, Convener. I mean, just reading your amendment now, I think that covers the spirit of what Councillor Bundy is also looking for in my mind, and I think my contribution is very much in the, having seen the debate in Parliament last week and heard what the Minister had to say. As you've covered, there have been commitments to the economic impact assessment, and I think there's certainly the involvement of Scottish Enterprise, and you've mentioned the council as well. I am the only thing I would say, and I wouldn't amend it, so to speak, but I think one of the things is about the language that, yes, we are all concerned and worried, and I think that's important that we express that concern, but also that from a point of view of looking to the future, I think the language is important, that there's tremendous opportunity for Grangemouth both as a town and as a site, and that where I slightly disagree in the language that Councillor Bundy used in terms of conserving what is there, I think what we all know is that we must look to the future. We must embrace the opportunities to conserve purely the models that are there at the moment is a disaster for all of us in terms of the just transition and the moves that need to be made. And I think that what's been discussed and quite widely, not just recently since the announcement, but I know that in the just transition for the Grangemouth area inquiry that was taken forward in the Parliament, and I know that Michelle Thompson, the local constituency MSP, did push hard for that inquiry to be undertaken, and during the course of that committee, they did have in the report, it is alluded to that there are concerns about the GFIB governance model, and they were very clear about that the remit and the transparency and what's actually happening within that does need to be improved. And I was really pleased that from listening into the debate last week that there are changes, and as you've said, there are proposals to change that model, and that I think that is really welcome, and we should be more transparent. We should be welcoming the transparency on that. So I mean, I don't have a problem with what your amendment is either, convener. I think I would just wanted to say that I think that we need to be positive, that there are issues which all governments have to work together, as you've said. I think particularly on the biofuel possibilities, on sustainable aviation fuel, we know that those aspects lie with the UK government, and so we need to be pushing on that. There are no these things are not going away, and not just because Taylor Swift has announced a new album and is presumably going to be doing more jetting around the planet in her private jet. We need to be looking at the future of what is required from these markets, and that does lie partly and mainly with the UK government at the moment. So I would agree with the spirit of both, really, but just to focus on the positive about the opportunities we have to actually make a positive impact to our communities and to the climate going forward. Thanks, Convener.
Thank you. Councillor Bundy, do you want to come back?
Just a response, 19.1, because I was mentioned. I recognise the need to move away from oil and gas in the long term. I think that's the difference between conservatism and traditionalism. I don't want to keep there for the sake of keeping what's there. I want to keep the spirit of Grangemouth being at the forefront of industry and research and development and at the heart of Scotland's economy. And you do that by ensuring that the Grangemouth oil refinery stays open just now in the short term to maintain this high skilled staff that we have, because the replacement being proposed by Petro Ineos is an import terminal which will rely on oil and gas being imported from overseas. And looking at the track record of many other countries, will be refined in a way that's far more emitting of CO2 than in Britain. So I don't see that as a great positive for the green agenda in the short term. I actually think that is making it worse. And in the terms of geopolitical security, why would you want to rely on imports from the Middle East, China, Russia, and even the US just now? Why would you want to put a country in that position when you could do it domestically? So I think in the short term, it makes common sense, both economically, environmentally, and in foreign policy, to keep the refinery open. And in terms of that just transition, you keep the high-skilled workforce in Grangemouth, you stop that depopulation of industry, and then you put the just transition training in place, so you retrain that staff force, and then you gradually make that transition, because a transition does take a period of time. And just now, what we're facing in Grangemouth is quite blunt and doesn't seem very just.
Yeah, I think that was a wee bit more than a 19-1, but I appreciate that Councillor Murtagh has to go. Okay, well, we'll have about 15 minutes, and if we could come back at just after past. Thank you. Okay, thank you, colleagues. We'll now come back into session, and I'll go to Councillor Bundy first of all, if there's anything particular before I open up for debate.
That we are still going to put forward our motion as presented.
Thank you. Councillor Spears.
Thank you. As a Grangemouth elected member for some 36 years coming up for, I certainly don't have to justify my loyalties to any party, but I certainly justify loyalties to my town and to my district. It's vital that the refinery remains open in a refining capacity. Boiling oil is what we do in Grangemouth. Yes, change is coming. Nobody wants to sit in stagnation. But until that comes, like many of the other projects, and I mean the main three projects are flood protection, Freeport, and refining oil. That is what Grangemouth is, and that's what Grangemouth will go on to be. We need to take this time to sit, not just as political parties, administrations and opposition. We need to work together on this. We're not just saving our town. I'm not just saving the town or our district, but our country. And if the Freeport means that Mr. Radcliffe can think he can bring oil in at a cut price, then that does not augur well for any of us. So the implications of what could happen here should really be brought forward to the national government and the Scottish government that we need to keep refining oil in Grangemouth.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Spears. Councillor Steinbank.
Yeah, just a contribution to that question on the Conservative motion, Convener. I think I'm not going to go over the points Councillor Murtaugh and Spears have articulated very well there. I think just to comment, a just transition and energy justice isn't just something nice to have in the transformational process to get to net zero. It is an absolutely essential element of getting there. Just to clarify on point 3 of the Conservative motion, I do believe the meaning is suggesting that the work stream on council writing their own economic impact assessment wouldn't begin until something is seen by the Scottish Government or Scottish Enterprise. Can I just clarify if that's correct?
Thanks, Ewan. Yes, so it calls on the council to produce an economic impact assessment unless one's not produced by the Scottish Government or the Scottish Enterprise. Economic impact assessment has clear definition in legal terms. It's nicely set out in actually the flooding legislation, where it shows that councils have responsibility to produce an economic impact assessment for flood protection schemes, and it's part of the process for the funding. So the council has actually produced an economic impact assessment for Grangemouth and surrounding areas for flooding impact. So the definition of an economic impact assessment is there. And that is the definition that I hope that the Scottish Government and the Scottish Enterprise are currently meeting in the work that they're producing. Another thing that was concerning about the Minister's answer on Thursday was that it said that it was the Scottish Government assessing and the Scottish Enterprise assessing, and there was no further details, no details about timelines, no details about when publication would be met, even though they said that one was already produced. So if one is produced, why is it not being published straight away? So there's so many unanswered questions in terms of the Minister's answer. And in comparison to the administration amendment, I think number 3, as it's kept in our motion, would be a safety net, just in case. But I don't suspect foul play, but it's just a safety net.
Thanks, Councillor Bundy. Thanks, Convener. Satisfied with that answer.
Okay, thank you. Just to say that there is an economic impact assessment being carried out. There was one done, I do believe it would have been 2020 or 2021. 2 years ago, and that's seeking to be updated. And I think that is where things are at the moment. I think that there's information being sought and waited for from others, and therefore that's why there's not able to give a timescale on when it's likely to be completed, because I've not had a timescale to when that information will be brought forward. But we're actively participating in that. And while the council can do its own economic impact assessment, I think that this is much wider than Falkirk Council, and therefore will require input from other agencies and bodies, including industry, in order to be able to completely do that. So therefore, it's important that we take into account that wider context. Councillor Nimmo.
Thanks, convener. Being another Grangemouth councillor, I share everybody's concerns regarding the Grangemouth refinery. There's a lot of uncertainty, and I think we're basing a lot of our comments on media reports rather than actual fact. And until we get a definitive answer in relation to what's being proposed here, it's going to be really difficult to do anything. The oil refinery itself has been subject to major lack of investment over the years, and I'm a bit concerned that this is maybe a ploy on behalf of Jim Radcliffe to get extra government funding from Westminster and or the Scottish Government. The sooner we get an answer from INEOS, the Scottish Government or Scottish Enterprise, the better, and we'll be able to move forward. Thanks, convener.
Excuse me, thank you for that. Any other comments or contributions? Councillor Bundy, do you wish to sum up?
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Bowes.
Thank you. And can I say that I agree with particularly the local members and the support for the refinery. Talking directly to the motion, and I appreciate what Councillor Bundy is talking about in possible safety net, but however, I do think it's a bit of a premature. I think we wait to see what the Scottish Government actually produces, and then it might be relevant to bring it forward at that point. I think there's also been enough detail given on what GFIB are doing and how they are, because it's actually relatively recently set up by the sounds of it. If they've only done a setup and a direction and now one set of minutes, but I think you've also discussed that they've also done some more. Sorry, Nico.
Sorry, Councillor, in fairness, GPIP has been set up for a number of years now, so it's a number of years, but in terms of the most recent minutes, they're much more comprehensive than previous minutes, but that has been set up for a number of years now.
But you'd also mentioned that they're talking about how their meetings and things like that, and maybe looking at improving rather than going every quarter. So again, to ask to do more when they're already doing that, I think is again partly premature.
Mr. Binney, you wanted to come in?
Thanks. It was just to update that whilst GFIP has been operating for several years, there has been a acceptance in recent, like in the last 6 months, that it's maybe not been operating as effectively as desired, and so there's been a review undertaken, and that's the element that I think you're referring to in terms of there's been a revision to what's planned and how it's going to operate moving forward, and that includes much more significant ministerial involvement and business involvement. And so it is very early stages of that new inception of GFIP, and we need to see how that develops.
Okay, Councillor Bundy, do you want to sum up?
Thank you, convener. I think there's been consensus around the room about the importance of Grangemouth Oil Refinery for Grangemouth, the wider community, and for Scotland. And it's right that Councillor Spears was saying that this is not a party political issue, it's not a constitutional issue. And I'm pleased that both in Holyrood on Thursday and in here today that it's not been debated through that lens, because it doesn't matter where you stand on the question of independence, doesn't matter what party you stand for, you can all see the importance that Grangemouth plays for the local community, local businesses, families, and wider in terms of Scotland and Britain's energy security. So it's imperative that we do all that we can to keep the high-skilled workers in Grangemouth, keep the refinery open, and then invest to ensure that just transition. In response to the points that Councillor Bowes has just said, I don't think number 3 is premature, because it is saying that the Scottish Government and Scottish Enterprise have the prerogative. It's recognising their role in the process, and it is just a safety net. So if a safety net is there, why would we need to take it out, then take it back in the future? Whereas just now it's saying Scottish Government, Scottish Enterprise, you do your job, and then it's just a safety net. So I think point 3 of the motion is correct to remain as it is. In terms of the Grangemouth Future Industry Board, I accept that there has been a review, and the minutes from January 2024 are far more substantial, and I recognise that there is also commercial interest and not everything can be shared. And it is right that everything is explored. So in terms of the UK government responsibilities, and Convener, you mentioned the biofuel, as it was explained in Holyrood on Thursday, the Minister, Graham Stewart, took that back to DEFRA, and DEFRA is now exploring that because it has implications in food security and food production. So these things do take time to go through the bureaucracy of government. But it's right that the UK government and the Scottish government are both held accountable, because, as I tried to explain in my opening remarks, it is fractured, the devolution settlement in this area, and there's going to be different responsibilities for each government. And it's imperative that both governments work together and push aside any differences that they may have. But I think it is also right for point 2 of the motion to remain in terms about the lack of transparency, because I think if anyone looked at the 2023 minutes regarding the Grangemouth Future Industry Board, I think everyone would come to the conclusion that those minutes lack transparency, and they were under 10 lines of notes combined, and I don't think that's good enough. And in terms of 4, I think it just complements the conclusion that the Grangemouth Future Industry Board has come to, the need for more regular updates regarding the future of the refinery and actions to help save Grangemouth, and actually what needs to be done investment-wise for that just transition, so Grangemouth can be at the front of the green industrial strategy. So I'm happy to keep the motion I put forward as proposed.
Okay, thank you. We will go to the vote. Mr. Moody.
Yes, thank you, Convener. And the motion which is on the agenda is moved by Councillor Bundy and seconded by Bailey Kerr, against which there is an amendment moved by you, Convener, and seconded by Councillor Garner, which has been circulated. Councillor Bowes.
Amendment.
Councillor Bundy.
Motion.
Councillor Deacon.
Amendment.
Councillor Garner.
Amendment.
Councillor Hannah.
Motion.
Bailey Kerr.
Motion.
Councillor Meikle-John.
The amendment.
Councillor Nimmo.
Motion.
Councillor Patterson.
The motion.
Councillor Spears.
Motion.
And Councillor Steinbank.
Motion.
Convener, there are 7 votes for the motion. There are 4 votes for the amendment. The motion is carried.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the second of the motions, assault against the public sector staff. And again, I'll go to Councillor Bundy.
Thank you, Convener. This motion was proposed following an article in the Sunday Post, which they did a freedom of information request on public sector bodies regarding the rate of verbal and physical assaults in Scotland in the public sector. And it was deeply worrying and concerning that it came back saying that there were 51 reports of verbal and physical assaults every day in Scotland. And as an elected member of Falkirk Council, it was even worse to read that Falkirk Council saw the largest increase in the past 5 years, rising from 298 in 2018-19 to 826 in 2022-23. And this trend coincides with the rise in assaults in verbal and physically against teachers, which we've seen in the Falkirk Council area, which was highlighted by Freedom of Information requests, which I brought forward at executive last year. It is absolutely right that no members of staff in this council should go to work fearing physical or verbal assault. And I think for the majority of staff, that is the case. They do not fear physical or verbal assault. But for too many, that is the reality. And it's not just in teaching. Since I've put forward this motion, I have had emails and phone calls from constituents and from further afield in Falkirk highlighting the threat that they feel in their day-to-day work. And it can be from refuge collection, social care, and of course, teachers. Even one teacher said that they fear for their life going to school. And I think that is totally unacceptable. We have seen progress since last year regarding the interaction between teachers who feel that, or that feel that they have been a victim of a physical or verbal assault in the classroom. But again, for too many teachers, they feel that not enough's being done. One school comes to mind where teachers were saying they didn't even know that there was a reporting process. So it seems to be not systematic failures because the systems are in place and I've seen the systems and they work, but getting it down onto the ground level where people are actually experiencing these physical and verbal assaults, there needs to be a plan put in place to reach these people so it's as easy for them as possible, because the system is there and it's just a shame that it's not fully reaching down, because if it were reaching down, I and other members of my group wouldn't be getting that feedback. So the motion I'm putting forward asks for a plan to be put forward to reduce the verbal and physical assault in the Falkirk Council area, and that is quite vaguely worded, I'll admit, but it's to try and put less constraint on officers because this is a huge issue, and trying to explore the reasons for an increase. There's so many it could be, and it'd be wrong of me to try and name them all. It could be an increase in reporting, which some might say can be a positive, but to me that means it's just been an issue that's been there for longer and we're now finding it. What was the impact of lockdown? What's the impact on technology? And that's just to name a few. There could be so much more that needs to be explored. And then from that, what can the council do to try and mitigate that so staff feel safe when they go to their work? And this would be a very big piece of work, I acknowledge, because it's not just in schools. As I've said, it's different sectors within the council that people have come to me raising their concerns. So this would be a very substantial piece of work, but I think it is a worthy piece of work because, again, it is actually the rights of people to go to their work, not feeling that they are going to be on the receiving end of verbal or even physical assaults. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Bundy. You have a seconder?
Please a second, Convener, the right to come back in.
Okay, I'm going to go to Mrs. Algie first to maybe give a bit of an overview of the position and indeed the work that's ongoing.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. I'm happy to provide that. There is considerable work ongoing already on all of these areas that you've talked about. And I heard you say that some teachers are not aware of the process, so that disappoints me because part of that considerable work has been joint awareness raising sessions in schools by our health and safety team and our trade unions. And that's not just us as officers doing that on our own. As I say, it's the trade unions who are getting behind us and absolutely with us, trying to make sure that everyone understands how to report these issues. There has been an increase in issues. Now, part of that has been about the very proactive work we've been doing to raise that awareness. excuse me, it's not good that we've seen the increase, but that is on the back of the awareness raising that we've been doing. It has been an increase since COVID, and I think there are, and you've mentioned a few of the reasons, there are a number of reasons why we believe that's the case. We have also seen a significant increase of children in our schools who have additional support needs. We have various mechanisms in place to support staff in these situations. So, for example, there should be debriefs with their head teachers, there should be discussions if these types of situations happen. If the incidents are serious, there's also, as well as health and safety reporting, which is the statistics you've got, there are also incident reports that come to myself and the head of service to make sure that we're cited on these and take appropriate actions, and ensure the head teachers are taking appropriate actions. So all of that is there. We also have the ability for staff to be referred to our employee counselling scheme, to our occupational health service, or to other supports that may come up that would be of assistance to them. In addition, we have looked at training, and some of that has been rolled out. More of that needs to be done, but that is now being looked at through a working group that includes education officers and trade union representatives and our health and safety team, to make sure that that work is carried out, and that in response to better availability of data, which has been achieved through the awareness raising, that means that they can better analyse that, look at some of the core issues, and make sure that any support, any training is absolutely targeted at the right areas, rather than us just trying to sample training to see if it works. So we're targeting that training as well. But I'll pause there and happy to take any further questions, Convener.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Councillor Deacon.
Thank you very much, Convener. I would like to thank Councillor Bundy for bringing this issue forward, for the opportunity to highlight the work which has been ongoing for some time to better understand and address the issues that are subject to this motion. I would also like to take a moment to thank our dedicated and professional staff right across the Council who carry out their work under, at times, extraordinarily challenging circumstances. Our services do not run by magic. There are significant numbers of staff who are delivering within our communities, public spaces and schools, and the communities of Falkirk District benefit from their hard work and contribution to society. With that said, no one should have to turn up to work with a fear that they may be involved in an incident of any sort. Much of what we hear around violence at work, and more recently about behaviour-related incidents within schools, comes from a system across the country that is under pressure. The impacts of lockdown and the lack of social interaction are yet to be fully understood, while the increasing pressure on families, communities to the cost of living crisis we all face translates to a higher level of anxiety, uncertainty and emotion. This can often lead to inappropriate behaviours, which at times can escalate to unacceptable levels. It's also important to know that, having done further analysis, most incidents are not assaults. The vast majority reported occur in primary schools by pupils due to dysregulated or distressed behaviour. While this is inappropriate behaviour, it is not intended to cause harm. This is being looked at by a working group of officers and trade union colleagues to ensure appropriate changes are being made to reporting so we can further assist the staff. But this is not an issue that has developed overnight. We've had reporting systems in place for a long time, and it is vital for the staff are encouraged to report incidents whenever they happen. Statistics put forward only paint a part of a picture. Has there been an increase in reporting? Yes. And to understand this increase, we have to understand the journey Falkirk Council has been to get to this point. The system we had in place worked to an extent, but allowed limited opportunity to better understand the data and trends we could see through the new EvoTix Assure system of reporting, and the work undertaken by both Council and trade unions to encourage reporting of this new system. While the old system was effective as it could be argued with the manner of reporting discouraged people from filling the forms out, and therefore incidents were underreported. The more data we have, the clearer the picture and more effective any effort will be in addressing and mitigating these types of incidents. Turning to support, and as already has been said, if an employee has been involved in distressing incidents, they should receive a debrief from their manager. The Council also offers an employee assistance programme, occupational health and other services which are appropriate to the support and counselling, appropriate to be engaged with as part per any workplace injury within the Council. Schools are also provided appropriate support and, sorry, I'm losing my place here, and counselling to any people who have been involved in such instance or been the cause of such instance. Training is also being implemented to ensure those working with pupils with distressed behaviour are best equipped to be able to calm the situation to avoid as far as possible an incident reoccurring. A significant amount of work has already gone into risk assessments, with actions being taken and further developed as we collect more data through our reporting systems. This isn't a paper exercise that pays lip service to the issue. It is a dynamic and reactive system that allows our services to be better prepared for the eventuality, at the same time as developing wider actions to reduce incidents, while providing appropriate support for anyone who requires it. This reflects all the changes being made to better understand utilising the system we now have in place. We're having this debate today because this reporting system allows this information to be available. We take no issue with the motion at hand, but it's important to understand that Falkirk Council has a robust system in place that addresses the serious issues as effectively as possible, while maintaining level of risk assessment to minimise the impact of any incident resulting from any incident that can occur.
Thank you, Councillor Deacon. I will now open it up for any questions or comments. Councillor Patterson.
Thanks, Convener. Of course, Falkirk Labour wholeheartedly agree with the sentiment of this motion, and we agree that it doesn't just extend to teachers, it extends to all council staff and private staff for that matter. And while it is heartening to hear from Councillor Deacon that these statistics are not all physical assaults, it would have been helpful to have sight of this data coming into the meeting today so that we knew exactly what it is we were talking about. Because in order to best support our staff and our young people, we really need to know what it is that's included in these statistics. And that's not for a moment to belittle the effects that verbal abuse can have on employees. But again, we really need to know what it is that we're talking about so that we know what support's best to put in place. And I think off the back of the motion, there's just a couple of questions that I would like clarified. Obviously, are we engaging with teachers and unions on this to have their perspective? And equally, obviously, while we're always striving towards prevention of any violence, what do we have a system in place to support and compensate teachers if they have unfortunately been victims of violence at work?
Mrs. Alger.
Thank you, Convener. In terms of the statistics, we do have those statistics, so we can share them. I think it's worth clarifying, however, that as a result of the work we've been doing, we've probably came to a point where we feel we need to change the categories to make them more meaningful. So there is work being done through the working group that I described earlier, which does involve education employees, it involves our health and safety and trade unions. There's work being done to try and come up with meaningful categories that lets us better analyse some of the data that's coming through as serious incidents, because they are of varying degrees. Some are very, very minor incidents, some are more serious. But it's when you look back into the detail, and I would want to provide members with the assurance that anything that's reported to us is going through that system and is considered by both the line manager and by our health and safety team. So it's not just entered onto a system by the employee and nothing happens with it and it goes into data. There is work that gets done to analyse all of that as well and look at the support. So the statistics we do have, and we can provide those, but further work does need done of them. Our trade unions are absolutely involved in this, and you mentioned that. And I'm sorry, I've forgotten your third question.
Compensation.
Compensation.
So I know that we have occupational health to help if there's been physical issues, but do we also have compensation if the unfortunate has occurred?
If there is an injury at work, and that would include something as a result of an incident, there is a separate arrangement for sick pay, which would kick in at that point in time. And there is information within our national conditions of service that would automatically kick in as well. So that's something that would apply to all employees right across Scotland as part of those national conditions of service if something were to happen in that situation.
Thank you. I really appreciate that response. And I think I think a large part of this issue, and again, not to take away from violence towards staff because it is a gravely serious issue, but I think that we really moving forward do need better reporting in place, because we also don't want to sensationalise and give a poor outlook on the conditions that our teachers are facing, because I know that a lot of teaching staff love working in the Falkirk area, and I would hate for there to be unwarranted view that there's escalating violence. Thanks.
I think that's exactly why they want to look at the various categories, because every incident is taken seriously, but that can be from an accidental bumping in that causes injury to something far more serious, but each and every one's taken and recorded and appropriately investigated. So I think that's why it's about being able to put it into context of what is a really serious assault, and what isn't as a serious assault, but how do all of those get dealt with, to ensure the protection of both involved. As if we take schools, but there's a protection of the child as much as the staff as well. Okay, I've got Councillor Kerr and Councillor Nimmo.
Thanks, Convener. With regards to the motion that's been brought forward, I think it's only fair that no one goes to their work as ready to be stated to be abused either physically or mentally. We all keep saying that we have a duty of care for our employees, which must be at the core of our mission. Councillor Bundy tried to raise this issue at a previous meeting. However, at that stage was not allowed to proceed because it wasn't in the agenda. We take the physical and verbal abuse of council staff very seriously. I don't know if there's an understanding of how this affects people who are at the receiving end of this abuse, because it doesn't happen to us. I was approached by a friend's wife who is a teacher assistant who's been off work for over 2 years. She was attacked by a people on several occasions and was targeted by the same people over and over again. It got to the stage where she fears for her life. When speaking to this lady, she has raised these attacks on her several occasions and been offered mediation. However, the attacks continued. Another friend's wife, who was a teacher, who I spoke to on Friday at a wedding, and she's been off for a year after being hit by an iron bar by a pupil. And she says to me, and I was absolutely embarrassed when she says it, she says to me, I know he's going to kill me. You know how that made me feel? Absolutely gut-wrenched. To make things worse, she went back after a year and had got that flu thing that is going about the new. It's now triggered an absence for her being off. Both these women feel they've been let down by the authority, saying that they're not being listened to or cared. These are only some. We have a plaintiff's procedure, which I'm glad to hear has been looked at and hopefully improved, but I feel the complaints that's been brought forward is only the tip of the iceberg, and we need to have, or the staff, no matter what area it is in, they need to have confidence that these procedures will work. Recently, there was an incident at one of the schools where 30 pupils surrounded a teacher. and she was absolutely devastated. But that isn't a physical assault, it was a verbal assault. And a lot of these incidents didn't get reported. And I'm hoping that the new procedures, or the procedures that we're looking at, will help the reporting of these incidents. I don't know what the answer is to encourage them. I don't know how we fix it. However, what we can't do is continue allow the physical and verbal abuse that's happening. And a lot of times the pupils realise that there's I think there's very limited things that can happen to them. And I think that years ago, the way that pupils were dealt with was the wrong way. But I think that nowadays it's went completely the right opposite way. And I just hope that through Karen's statement that we are looking at it, and hope that we encourage more people to come forward. I'm hoping that eventually it can be eradicated. I just feel that we need to listen. Sometimes we listen, but we're not listening. So that's why I'm in full support of Councillor Bundy's motion, Convener. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Nimmo.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Just a quick question for Karen. I'm a bit concerned that there's been no mention whatsoever about any police involvement in any of the comments that have been made so far. If I was a secondary teacher and I was assaulted in class, got my nose broken, when would the police be involved? You can have all the internal policies and procedures, but an assault is an assault, irrespective of whether it's in the classroom or out in the street. What are we doing about that?
I think there's a clear process for that.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. There absolutely is a clear process for that, and the police are involved at appropriate stages. So whilst I've not mentioned it because we're talking about our internal processes within schools, if something like that does happen, we would report the incident to the police. And even where it's maybe not an incident that we would report, we would also work with our police who are based in the high schools to get them involved, talking to the pupils, talking to the parents, and making sure that appropriate steps are taken about guidance, support, or any actions that need to be taken. So that is all in place. And maybe just in response to Bailey Kerr's comments, absolutely, no one should feel like that coming to their work. But I hope from what I said, you do feel that we are actually doing quite a lot here. There's always more we can do. We haven't cracked it because it is such a difficult issue, but there's more we can do, which is why we have the working group in place that is continually looking at this and continually looking at steps we can take. And the two ladies that you talked very specifically about, if you wish to pass your details to me, I will be happy to look at whether we've dealt with those situations appropriately. Thanks.
Thank you. Just to say, on the other side of the coin, just through experience of a family member who was the subject of an assault, the work that was done through our schools, our school-based police officers, and indeed the senior management team were very good, very effective, very swift, and those perpetrators of the assault were dealt with very, very effectively, very quickly, and indeed support package put in place for the victim of that. So that, while it's regrettable and it should never have happened, the support that was there was very swiftly put in place to help everybody, including those families of the perpetrators that were involved, to have the understanding. What I wanted to ask, though, is around our behaviour disclaimer, our clear public image about what's acceptable behaviour. Because I'm thinking very much of those lone workers, people that are out and about in our communities day in, day out, housing officers, etc. And having that clear message from the council about what behaviours are acceptable.
Yeah, thank you, convener. And I think that's where, if there is an incident, this is where the employees are encouraged to speak to the line manager about it, to get guidance on what is acceptable and what isn't. And where it's unacceptable behaviour, that's where actions would be taken. I think the other point I would make is in terms of our lone workers, because it's a valid point about we've got quite a high number of lone workers across the council. And we do have a system in place where they have technology to alert us should anything happen when they are out and about doing their job, and they can actually notify and get support almost immediately if they use that system to alert us. So we have all of those procedures in place. We've got a lone working policy in place, and we have guidance to staff about what they should expect, etc. But that's where also the support from line managers comes in as well, to provide confidence to those staff that if there is unacceptable behaviour, we will take appropriate actions in those situations.
And how are we conveying that to the public in general about, we will not tolerate that unacceptable behaviour? And
certainly in previous years, we have actually had posters, leaflets, guidance up in all of our front-facing offices about treatment and good treatment of staff. It's a point, though, that we can probably do more on, and we'll certainly take that back and have a look at it. But there was certainly a previous guidance campaign around some communication with members of the public about what was acceptable, etc. But we can relook at that because it is a few years since we've looked at it.
The other aspect to that I would ask about is the fact there's an awful lot of more communication that's not face-to-face but over the telephone. Okay, as an employee, you maybe have a wee bit more control there, but it's still, you can be the subject of verbal abuse as a result of that.
Yeah, convener, that is certainly another area which is sometimes a little bit hidden because it is over the phone. What we have done is in the majority of our call arrangements where the public can phone direct to members of staff, we now have recording arrangements in place. So those calls can be recorded, we can listen back, we can then take appropriate actions if a member of staff then reports that incident and alerts us to a situation that is inappropriate, and we can make a judgment then based on that recording to assess the situation, provide appropriate support to the staff, and also contact a member of the public to advise that the behaviour was inappropriate.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, convener. I think the debate and discussion here that we've had today is evidence that this issue is a matter of great concern to all of us, and that it was a very timely thing for Councillor Bundy to bring forward this motion. We do need further detail about what's going on. What I would like to say, though, is, and Councillor Bundy did raise this, we're not, although much has been said about teaching staff, we must also be talking, as you say, about lone working staff. There are housing staff, there are social care staff, and I think we also need to have consideration to the partner agencies that we work with. We can't tell them what to do, obviously, but we can, as Councillor Meiklejohn's saying, put forward a general statement of the position that we think they should have. I think we need to make sure that people don't go away from today with the idea that this is happening very, very frequently. I think we have to recognise the vast majority of members of the public and pupils are not going out and abusing staff. But as the last 2 points in Councillor Bundy's motion say, no member of staff should go to work fearing violence or abuse. And we do need to have plans in place. The reporting has been a big part of the discussion, and we do need that data. We need to be assured that the reporting systems are easy for people to use, and encourage people to report. But in some ways, what's more important is using that data to produce a plan to reduce the likelihood of it happening at all. And that's what matters most. My understanding, you talked quite a bit, Mrs. Aldi, about the encouraging people to speak to their line managers. Now, my understanding is that what has been put in place is more of an anonymous, there is an anonymous system that people can use. And I would certainly encourage to consider that. Line managers certainly should be involved, but sometimes people are reluctant to take that route. And we should be doing everything we can to ensure it's as easy and as comfortable for people as possible.
Mrs.
Certainly the system that employees use isn't anonymous, because if there was a particular incident that we need to follow up on, we would want to speak to that employee. We would want to get more information, we'd want to investigate it, we'd want to look at what support is available to them. So in that respect, our system isn't anonymous. If the employee does, however, feel uncomfortable speaking to their line manager, there are various routes, though, that they could speak to HR colleagues, to trade union colleagues, to others who may be able to support them in a slightly different way. But the more that employees report and the more that they report openly, it allows us better ability to investigate, to look into the matters and to look at what support we can provide.
I apologise. I shouldn't have used the word anonymous in that situation. Clearly, there needs to be follow-up, but it's about there being more than one route for reporting, so that where people are uncomfortable with one particular route, they have other options.
Just a question. Cam, the health and safety system you've got, can you tell us a wee bit more about it? Is right, it's relatively new.
It is a relatively new system. It's we've done a lot of benchmarking before we procured the system. There's been a lot of work done to develop that since we got it, and we're still working on that. I know that our colleague Michael Durrington, who is our Senior Health and Safety Advisor, is on the call. So if there's more information you would like, I would, if it's okay, convener, to bring Michael in to comment on that.
Good afternoon, Michael.
Thank you, Councillor Meiklejohn. Thanks, Karen. Thank you for the invitation. Just in response to Councillor Garner's question, we procured this system initially at the beginning of 2020, which is a very bad time to implement a computer system during a pandemic. So we've done a reasonable amount of work on it in relation to the incident reporting side over that period of time. And our current focus is, as been mentioned, we're doing a significant review of what we call our incident classifications or categories with our trade union colleagues and services. When we got the system originally, because we were bringing it in during COVID, we essentially just carried our old, we had an old reporting process called the HR14 form, where basically people would print out a form, fill it in, hand it to their manager, it would get the investigation done on that, signed off, and then it would get sent to the manual input into the payroll system. So we largely carried those categories across because that was basically what we could manage at the time with COVID happening, and also we didn't need to seek exemptions or anything else like that, or have much consultation with trade unions around that. What we've been really targeting probably over the last sort of 12 to 18 months is looking at the categorizations we use, because I think the way we currently have it structured is the way to report a lot of these instances is you select you're going to report a violent incident, and then you select physical violence. So when it comes to me answering an FOI and I get asked for a response on incidents we hold of assault, things like that, that's the data that matches up to that. So we can't really, we report it because we hold it basically, but the key thing we sort of find is we actually probably don't get a lot of accurate or good quality data come through from other areas of the council, because they see that reporting pathway as being very specific and not matching what's happening. So sort of the last 12 to 18 months, we've done a lot of work with coming up with a new set of categories, which we're working on trying to finalise. That also aligns to a lot of the things that are coming out from Scottish Government in relation to education, and then aligning sort of our investigations as well around those categories, so it makes it much easier for people to basically investigate the incidents, and we can provide managers with the guidance of the questions to ask. That's one side of it. The side we're currently really pushing is the risk assessment side. We're doing a lot of work with services around reviewing their existing risk assessments to migrate them onto the EvoTech system. And we're using that as an opportunity to look at their existing control measures and how they're managing risks like lone working or workplace violence or occupational violence, however you wish to refer to it. So we're doing a lot of work in that space as well, because that's a good opportunity to look at what we've currently got and look at the ways we're managing it.
Okay, thank you, Michael. I think there's no amendment come forward. We've had a very good debate on this. Councillor Murtagh, I'm really trying to wind up. I'm afraid if you can be very, very brief, and I'll ask Councillor Bundy to be very, very brief, and he's winding up as well.
Thanks, Kevin. I really do apologise I haven't left the meeting. It's just to make a very general point, as I have missed most of the debate, and I think it's just what we've learned in terms of that even where you get to instances of violence, that intimidation and situations where people are subject to abuse, as we know from other areas like domestic abuse and misogyny and violence against women in general, it doesn't start there. It starts at the environment which is created, and I think that elected members have a role to play in that too. I was really, really concerned that there were some reports from other elected members in other places of naming council staff and about thinking about what the impact on the council staff would be to be going to their work and feeling that they were subject to those kind of pile-ons potentially, or you know, an intimidatory environment. And I think that what's really important is we acknowledge that, you know, we have to create a system where everybody feels valued from the beginning, and that we all have a role to play in that, and everybody is responsible for making sure that that tone of respect right across the board is maintained right from the earliest language, and that is a commitment that everybody should be making, and that if we don't call those things out, we enable them. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear, that, you know, we should be, if we find practice like that, even if it's not ourselves, we should be calling that out and bringing it to others' attention. That's all I wanted to say, Convener.
Okay, thank you. We are going to get a report back, and a lot of what's been talked about today it will be in that report. I think there's been a lot of information shared, and while that, you just need to be mindful of how that's developed, there is a potential that we will see further reporting, but we have to try and view that as a positive, in that we do know where the incidents are happening and why they're happening, and therefore there can be a bespoke plan put in place to address that. So I think we just need to be careful about what we expect from that. But Councillor Bundy, can I give you just a minute or two just to briefly sum up?
Thank you, Convener, and I'd like to thank everyone for what I think has been quite a positive and open debate. I take the board and point that it is good that we are getting these figures in terms of, we know what's happening in the classroom, but having figures in terms of teachers being 5 a day is not good news. Being the council authority which has seen the highest increase in Scotland is not good news. And it's important, as Councillor Hannah was saying, that we actually look at that data to then develop the plan, and I'm encouraged to hear that that is what is going to be happening. But I also think a point that needs to just be re-emphasised is that there's many council staff, and it's not just teachers, who have said to me that they do not know the reporting system and they do not know how to report. And even I've had two have come to me saying that they've tried to report and they've been turned back and sent to the police. So I can give those details if you'd like. But it's just to ensure that people feel that it's open and accessible. And I think for 95, 96, 97% of people that is the case. But to make that the case for everyone, and then using the data that we have to find the root causes and developing that plan to tackle the issue which is in front of us, because at the centre of this motion is the belief that no members of staff should be going to work in fear. And if we can create that as a council, then we're taking a step in the right direction. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bundy. On that, brings this morning's executive to a close. I just thank everybody for their attendance and hope you have a pleasant rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you.